Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jackie Wers, and I am your substitute host for Science on Tap tonight. I want to say thank you so much to all of you for coming out on a Sunday night. I know that you were all dying to go watch the Oscars and just see what everyone was wearing. I just want to let you know I am wearing clothing, and that is as much as I remember. So tonight, I am super excited and thrilled that we have Dr. Scott Burns, who is going to be telling us all about why Oregon's unique geology gives us some of the most delicious wines in the world, some of which many of you are enjoying right now. Cheers to you all. Now, that 10th question was put in there about Jory because tonight's speaker, Dr. Scott Burns, has been instrumental in understanding more about the unique properties of the geology that make up Oregon and why this is such a special place to grow wine. So tonight's talk, I'm really excited to welcome Scott Burns up to the stage to learn more about the amazing terroir of the Willamette Valley. Everybody, please welcome Scott.
Well, welcome to everybody tonight, and congratulations on the quiz that you did and the winners, and so that's wonderful. And we're going to take it a little bit further tonight, and I'm excited. I've been talking to Science on Tap for 8, 9, 10 years. And so I enjoy doing this, and I love coming up to Alberta. My son and my daughter-in-law and grandkids live just around the corner, so it's I love this part of Portland. But I also love wine. And I have been working with wine for a long time. So generally when you get up in front of the people, you got to tell your credentials. And so I've been teaching 53 years. I started as a young beginning professor in 1970 in Switzerland. So I got a couple degrees from Stanford, PhD from Colorado. When I was at Stanford, we started tasting wine at this fledgling new area in California called the Napa Valley. And you could start at Mondavi and Sebastiani in the south and end up with Charles Krug and Christian Brothers at the end of the day. And you do most of the valley in one day. Now it takes you 2 months to do half of it. I mean, and so that was how I got started. And then when I taught in Switzerland for 5 years, I taught at a place called the American College of Switzerland. And it was right in the middle of the wine country, or it's in the ski resort above the wine country. And I also taught biology in addition to geology. And making wine teaches the students a lot of chemistry and biochemistry and stuff like that. So every year we made wine with the students. And we go down and pick the grapes in the vineyards, come up, do primary fermentation, secondary fermentation. And it was a white wine, chasselas grape. And so in those days, the white wine would be finished at Christmas time. The students would design the labels, we would cork it up, and they'd take it home on the plane to their parents and give it to them for Christmas, a gift to show their mom and dad that the $3,000 a year that they were paying for tuition, room, board, books, and ski lift ticket was well worth it. Now, and so that's how I got started, just to show you what I looked like back in those days. Here is a picture of me in 1972 when the yearbook was dedicated to me. And those are some of the bottles of wine that you see in front. And was it any good? No. But they learned an awful lot from that. Okay, there we go. Okay, thanks. So that's my background. And then when I came back to Oregon in 1990 and started teaching at Portland State, so I've been there for 33 years, I taught a soil class every year, and the grad students had to do a project. In 1992, one of the grad students said, I want to do a project on soils related to wineries. And I said, well, great. And so we started, we found out nobody knew their soil. And I knew nothing about them either, so we learned it together. Dion Starpiece did this, and then it went on, and she developed it into a master's thesis. That master's thesis and my lecturing in the mid-'90s completely changed the whole industry of winemaking, because all the wineries would have their vineyards all over, and they would choose, they go through the barrels, and they said, these are our best barrels, these are the next best barrels, etc. And they would blend all the best barrels together. And that would be their primo one. And then they take the second best, and then the leftovers were the ordinary types of wines. But what we did is we found that certain soils produced different flavors. And then they said, wow, we can market single vineyards. And so with that, now everybody's into single vineyards, and it all goes back to our research that we did many, many years ago. And so I'm going to take you through this tonight and talk a little bit about wine, etc. Now, one major change, oh, by the way, I have a glass of Pinot Gris that is being delivered to me for tonight, because I'm going to, oh, I love it. Oh, so this is going to be lots of fun. There has been a major change in the United States in drinking habits, and I'm sure that all of you are part of this. A major study was done over 10,000 people way back in 1982. And they said, what is your favorite alcohol? And you can see beer is right at the top. And then wine was only 16%, and liquor, so scotch, bourbon, martinis, etc., 35%. They redid that. Same one, similar large numbers, coast to coast, in 2012, and look what happened. Wine went way up. Now, the beer stayed just about the same, and a lot of the people in this study probably were in Portland, keeping it up there. But the hard liquor went down. Now, in the last few years, what's happened is with all the martini bars, et cetera, that we've got around, that number has gone up a lot. But back in 1980, 1990, did anybody go out to wine country? No, to go sampling wines on the weekends and stuff? No. But now everybody does. Every state in the United States has a winery. And so when you go to a lot of social events, what do you have? A lot of wine. And so there's been a major change, and so this all relates back to it. So every time you see a bottle of wine, it's going to be different from the next one, the next one, the next one, based on 8 different characteristics. Number one, obviously, is going to be the grape that you have got. And a Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be different from a Pinot Gris, different from a Chardonnay, etc. Here in the Willamette Valley, we have 12 different clones for the Pinot Noir. And so the type of grape is going to give different flavors, obviously. That's the most important. But secondly, the geology. And I'll show you this coming up. The rocks that are underneath that break down into the soils, that those provide the nutrients that go up into the plant and into the grapes and will give different flavors. Thirdly, climate. Climate is so important. And you really, to grow the best wines, you want to have dry climates. Not humid climates. You want that temperature to go up in the daytime and down at night, and up and down. And that leads to complexity. And so the whole West Coast all fits that characteristic, and that's why we grow great wines here. So climate is going to be important. When do we invite our friends to come to Oregon? It's always July, August, and September, because it doesn't rain that time of the year. And that's perfect for growing perfect grapes. Also, soil hydrology, because in the Willamette Valley, we don't irrigate. And so, therefore, you got to have enough silt and clay that is found in the soil in order to have the water at the end of the season for those grapes. And so that's very important. And then physiography. You want to maximize the heat units that the plant's going to be getting. So you're going to have south-facing slopes, and the perfect slope is 7 to 8 degrees. Facing south, and then you have it generally below 1,500 feet, otherwise it won't ripen up above and get to that 23-24% sugar or 23-24 Brix that you need at the end of the year. All of those things that you have got are so important for good quality wines. All of those affect the soil biota. Those are the fungi, the bacteria, the nematodes, termitodes, and all of the little critters that live in the soil, because they together will affect the grape plants and produce the flavors. And this comes out of France. And every 2 years we have the International Terroir Conference. And it's the French that are saying, all of those factors are important, but they all affect the soil biota, and that's where the flavors come from, and that's what is so important. So the soil is really, really important. And all of those first 6 that I've got up there, those are the factors that affect terroir, the taste of the place. And I'll get to that in the next slide. But there are 2 other factors that are very important that will affect the flavors. Obviously, the winemaker. Winemaker has huge decisions. Do you oak it or do you not? If you oak it, do you use French oak or a Hungarian oak or American oak? And then you use malolactic fermentation to give that big buttery texture that you have got. And then you use native yeast, or do you inoculate to have the same consistency every year? All of those are important and will affect the flavors. And then the last thing, vineyard manager. Do the rows go north and south? Do they go east and west? What type of trellis do you have? Big debate is, do you plow in between or cultivate, or do you have grass? I am out of the thing, have grass in between, because you have healthier soils. The more healthy the soils, the better the wines that you have got. So all of those together give you what we call terroir. And so that's the total elements of the vineyard. And it is the bedrock, the geology, and everything that I've been talking about, all those factors that were there. And so some of the people in Oregon say it's the sense of the place. Well, you don't. What's sense? You taste wines, and it's the taste of the place. And so that's what I push. And it's best expressed in cool climate grapes, and I'll come back to that in just a second. Now, we use this term now, for, terroir, for everything. And obviously coffee. And when you go down and buy your coffee, if you have a Sumatra or Africa or whatever, that is the taste of the place also. Also hops. A good brewmaster, especially making an IPA, will list now where the hops come from, because the combination of those will give the flavors that you have got. Maple syrup. I gave a talk at one of the 4 wineries in Vermont. And they say, oh, yeah, we know that Joe Blow down here has completely different flavored maple syrup than Fred over here. And so they use it in that area. And cheeses, you know all about that too. I mean, where's the cheese from and what's the style and stuff like that. And then we have the young faculty at the Geology Department of Portland State have carried on my work in terroir, but it's terroir of marijuana, because it's legal here in the state, and we, for years and years, have known which little valley down in the Klamath Mountains produced the best weed, but now we're trying to figure out what the soil is, and so come back in a few years and we'll have a similar talk on the terroir of marijuana. So Dick Erath, one of the original winemakers in the state of Oregon, is a great believer in terroir. He says 80% of the quality of the wine comes from the vineyard and 20% from the winery. And we've been lucky with the climate the last few years. The winemakers just kind of sit back and let the wines make themselves. And so the quality is all coming out of the vineyard and not from what they do in the winery. And that is really, really exceptional and fun to do. So let's take a look at a map, a washed out map of the world, showing all of the different continents. We have up here North America, but all of the Vitis vinifera grapes, which are the ones that we use, the main ones around the world, grow 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. And so in North America, all across Europe, even over to China. And you go to China and they have the Great Wall Cabernet. Beautiful bottles, beautiful labels. The winery that it comes out of good, is it any good? No, it's crap. But they eventually will catch up, and they will eventually have a good one, because it takes a few years for the industry to get together. And then down south in Chile and Argentina, the Malbecs are just so good over there. And then South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. I used to live in New Zealand. I think the best Sauvignon Blanc in the world comes out of north part of the South Island. And so climate is very important for growing grapes that you have got. But let me take you back to France and tell you a little bit more about terroir. And so the major grape growing areas that we have, Burgundy, we are the Burgundy of North America right here. And then Champagne up here, Alsace, where they grow, I believe, the best Pinot Gris in the world. And then we draw a line right through this, right here. This is what we call cool climate up here. And then you go down here, and this is intermediate warm. It's warmer down here. And so the grapes you grow down here are going to be completely different than the grapes you grow up here. Interesting thing about Champagne, because the climate is warming up so much that most of the wineries and champagne houses in Champagne have bought lots of property in southern Britain on limestone. It's got to be limestone. And they figure that probably within 20 years, the majority of all real champagne will actually be British grapes that they brought over, because it's already a little too warm to grow the champagne grapes in Champagne. So you want to have a real cool climate. So, and so in France, where the word terroir comes from, it means from the earth. And I used to live in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, so terroir is a term that we use quite a bit. And when you see a wine label from France, it will give you the name of the wine, and then the winery that you have got, the region that you got, the year, the alcohol, but it never tells you what grapes you're in. You're supposed to understand the terroir. If it is red and it's from Burgundy, it's got to be Pinot Noir. If it's white and Burgundy, you know it's going to be Chardonnay. If it's red and from Beaujolais, you know it's going to be Gamay grape. And if it's from Bordeaux, it's going to be a blend of Cab Merlot and Cab Franc. And so you're supposed to understand the terroir that you have got. But here is the Willamette Valley of France. This is the Burgundy area, which has the similar climate, but it has got different soils. And so the flavors of the Pinot Noir grapes that come from here and Chardonnay are going to be different that you have got. And geologists, first of all, there they rate the grapes, and they have an area that they call the Grand Cru, the best vineyards. Doesn't matter who the winemakers are, those are always going to be the best wines above that particular zone that you can see. The next one down is Premier Cru, and then you have the ordinary wines down below. Geologists went in and said, why is there this line here? Well, it's geological. And so here is the Grand Cru up here, Premier Cru here, and then the common wines that are down here. This is a marl up here. It's a dirty limestone. It's a calcium carbonate. It has a lot of silt in it. Whereas this is pure limestone, so that marl, that silt in there, gives it an additional flavor that creates an incredibly different flavor that makes the best ones year after year after year. That's terroir. And so, again, the grapes that we deal with around here, most of them are what we're going to call the Vitis vinifera ones, and the names that you know, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, and stuff like that. High sugar types of grapes that make absolutely great wines. Let's talk about climate. And the world's greatest wine climatologist is from Oregon. Greg Jones was a professor at Southern Oregon University. Then he took over the wine program at Linfield College. And then Linfield has had a lot of political problems lately, so he left that, and then he took over the family winery, Abasella, in Southern Oregon. But every year at the World Terroir Conference, he gives the update on the wines and the climate for the world. And every year in Oregon, when we have the Oregon Wine Symposium, he does that too. So he's incredibly well respected. Divides everything into cool climate grapes, intermediate warm, warm, and hot. And so what are the regions that you have got? Well, we are part of the cool climate that you see over here, as is Burgundy, as is the Loire Valley in France, that you've got in all of the German valleys, the Mosel and the Rhine Valley, etc. And then as you go down into intermediate warm, then you get southeastern Oregon, you get southern Oregon, Rioja, Spain, you also get Bordeaux and Chile. And so then you're getting into much heavier reds when you get into that. Then as it gets warmer, then you get into Napa Valley in California, and Sonoma Valley, Barolo Valley, Margaret River in Australia, Chianti region in France. And then the hot areas. When I think of hot, I think of Lodi, California. Man, hot, hot, hot. Also a couple of the Australian places that you have got. And so when you want to grow grapes, you say, what is the climate for my area? because that's going to dictate what grapes. And so we've got cool climate, intermediate warm, warm and hot, and then you have got the grapes that grow in those particular areas. So we are cool climate, and so we are going to be Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Rieslings, Gewürztraminer, Müller, Thurgau, Chardonnay, maybe a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. And then as the climate warms up, then you go into the next one, and then you start getting into some of the Merlots, the Tempranillos, the Cabernets, Dolcettos, and stuff like that. As it gets more and more warm, then you move over here, and then the real hot ones, that's where you got the Zinfandels, Nebbiolos, Grenache, etc., and raisins. So the climate is going to dictate. Now, the climate is warming. So Greg made a talk just a couple years ago. He said, in 25 years in the Napa Valley, they're only going to be able to grow Zinfandels because it's going to be so hot that they are not going to be able to do that. Here in the Willamette Valley, we have great future because we can go all the way across the whole side over here. And already, many of the winemakers here in the valley are planting Tempranillo and cool climate Syrah at the lowest elevations. And they're ripening right now. And then as the climate warms up, then they'll start moving those vineyards up the slopes to higher elevations. So as a result, the climate is really, really important in choosing. But the best transparent grapes that show up the differences in the flavors in terroir based on the soils. We've been doing climatic terroir for a long time. We call it vertical and compare same winemaker, same vineyard, but the 1985, 86, 87, and 88. Compare all of those different years. The years are going to give you different flavors. So that is climatic terroir. But terroir based on the soils, you got to keep the same vineyard and the same winemaker. And then what you compare different willamette and you will have different flavors. And also keep the same grape that you have got. And so that's what is so exciting about the Willamette Valley. Because I've given this talk on all continents, even Antarctica. I lead trips around the world for the Smithsonian. And we had an extra slot. So I said, let's talk about terroir of wine. I say, come to Oregon because you can taste these in the same valley. And you can have all of the different soils that produce the different flavors. And it's just exciting that you have got. So if you want to quit your day job and make a vineyard, what do you need to have? You need to have at least 180 frost-free days. Well, we got that easily here in the Willamette Valley. But growing grapes is contrary to your garden that you have got. When you plant your garden, what do? You fertilize it. You don't fertilize vineyards. You want to stress the grapes. You want all of that energy to go into the grape and not into the leaves and stems. And one of the questions that we had earlier was, how do you make the best grape flavors? You stress the grapes. And think of it, the plant coming back to life in the spring. And it says, what is my raison d'etre? What is my reason of being? It is to produce a great high-quality grape that is going to make a great wine. And so that's what you want to do. And so you don't want to have a lot of nutrients in the soil. And so that is very, very important. And we'll come back to that in a second. So you want to have well-drained soils, especially for the red grapes. And the maximum slope angles 7 to 8 degrees. Above that, it just is difficult to get the machinery and stuff up and down there. In the old days, we used to say, actually, when I started lecturing on this, it was 900 feet. Now we're up to 1,500 feet in the Willamette Valley. The climate has gone up that much in that period of time. You don't want frost avoidance. We don't have that problem here, but you go down the Illinois Valley down south in southwestern Oregon, it's a big deal. That you have got. And then you don't want the temperature to get below negative or positive 15 degrees Fahrenheit because it kills the whole plant. Not a problem here, but poor southeast Washington, it is a problem that they have out in that particular area. So how about the chemistry? And I know there are probably a couple of you who have backgrounds in chemistry. There are Dr. White of Australia has figured out, and there are 9 or 10 macronutrients that you need to have for growing grapes, and then 6 micronutrients. And I've just got the chemical symbols there, and I'm not going to go through all of those, but the micronutrients iron, manganese, zinc, copper, boron, and molybdenum. A lot of times the vineyard manager will go into the field, and instead of having dark green leaves, they'll be yellowish, greenish. And he said, oops, we have a nutrient deficiency. Most of the time it's a boron or molybdenum deficiency coming from the soils. And they'll apply a spray to that, and they'll overcome that and take that into consideration. And so we've done research on the flavors coming from all those. We also got into the trace elements. Nothing has come out since that time, but they may or may not be important in the flavors that you have got. And then the carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, that's coming out of the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide and the water that you have got. But you need to have those nutrients coming out of the soils in order to have the grapes. So let's talk a little bit about some terroir tasting. A good friend of mine, Terry Wright, down at Sonoma State University, did a project many, many years ago in a Pinot Noir vineyard. So this is north of Sonoma. He taught at Sonoma State. Iron Horse Vineyards at Sebastopol, and they had 2 vineyards. And same winemaker, same year, everything was the same except the 2 vineyards that they had. And they compared Vineyard A, which had 42% clay in the soils, and then Vineyard B, which was 20% clay. Same techniques, and same grapes, same clones, everything was the same except the soil. And then he did a blind tasting. In the end, what did they say? Everybody loved Vineyard B. Why? Because it had bigger nose, softer tannins, more elegance that you have got. And so this is an example of terroir tasting. And you do this with the cool climate grapes. And in Pinot Noir especially, thin-skinned red grapes. When you get into the Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs, you have thick skins. And so the varietal really overtakes everything that you have got. And so around the world, we have different ones. Again, I mentioned down in, the Malbecs that are coming from Argentina. We did a big study down there. Here's Aconcagua, the big volcano up here in the Andes. And it's all alluvial fans there that you have got. And what's happening is the mountains are going up, and then the streams are down cutting into these alluvial fans, so you have a whole bunch of terraces there. And the oldest terraces, the highest terraces, have got the best wines that you have got. And we did a study, and that's where we find the greatest caliche, the greatest calcium carbonate in the soils. And so there is a direct relationship between the soils and the best flavors that you have. And so that is a terroir difference that you have got. You go to Australia where you got old soils, low nutrients, and they are absolutely wonderful over there. But what I want to do is come back and end up talking a little bit about Oregon. And we think about Papa Pinot, David Lett, who came up here, 2 other winemakers graduated from University of California at Davis, and they said, we love Pinot Noir, and where should we plant our vineyards? And the instructor said, always go to Oregon, because that's got the perfect climate for that. And they did. One went down to the Umpqua Valley, and the other 2 came from up here. But David Lett, in the Irie vineyard that he has got, was very, very popular. And he took his grapes and his Pinot Noir in 1975 to the International Pinot Noir competition in France. And the French said, just to say, what is going on here? But they didn't win, but he almost did. He was very, very, very high up, and they said, just to say, Oregon. Where is this Oregon? And different flavors, different bedrock that you have got that is there. And so our whole industry has taken off since that period of time. And so these numbers are a little bit old. I keep going to the website, and they haven't updated lately. But basically, we have over 1,000 wineries in Oregon right now, and over almost 1,400 vineyards. There are a lot of people that are just farmers, and they sell to a lot of the urban wineries. One of my favorite urban wineries here is Hip Chicks Do Wine. And they don't have any vineyards, but they buy from all of these other vineyards, the farmers that are out here. But the ratio of red to white in Oregon is 70 to 30. And the reason is 59% of all of our grapes are Pinot Noir that are grown here, not only in the northern part, but the southern part. It's a little too warm down there, and those go into our general common type of Pinot Noirs that are sold coast to coast, like Union Wine Company, which is our largest one. And so the Willamette Valley cool climate grapes that we have here, the Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, and then the German styles that you've got. And I forgot Chardonnay up there. That should be in there too. In the old days, there were a few wineries here that actually grew Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. You wouldn't drink their wines because they never would mature. They just would never get to that 23, 24 bricks that you have got. Now, you have to read the labels because there are a lot of trucks that go up to southeast Washington with Pinot Noir grapes. It's too warm out there, taking grapes up and then picking up the Cabs, Merlots, Syrahs, and bringing them back down here. And also to southern Oregon, going between the two. And so we now make an awful lot of these heavier reds here in the valley, but they're the grapes of source from other areas that you have got. So if you look at the number of wineries that we have got in the United States, so this was another one of the questions that we had earlier, the big elephant in the room is California, but we're number 3 behind Washington. As I said, we're way over 1,000 now. And New York is number 4, and Texas is number 5. That's number of wineries. But then if you look at the production, we drop down. Look at how much we come down. And that was the question that was on the test beforehand. The reason is New York has Manischewitz and Ripple. Huge volumes that are out there, and they surpass us and go up. But we have much smaller wineries down here that we have got. But the effect on the total economy is way over $7 billion a year, and that's all of the hotels and all of the restaurants and everything else in addition to the direct wine sales. So it is a major thing here in the state. Also, I just wanted to point, these are all similar things, but last year, 7 of the Wine Spectator's top 100 wines were from Oregon. I mean, we are doing very, very well, and it is absolutely wonderful what we got here. There is Pinot Noir, which is the queen or the king grape that we have got here, and so many of the wines are so good. And so right now we have 23 AVAs, American Viticultural Association areas. This is an older one. We only had 16 when I did this one here. But these are regions that are defined by terroir. They're defined by the climate and the soils that you have got in these different areas. And so the Willamette Valley was the very, very first AVA that came up here. And then we have got the Umpqua that is down here. And then you got the Rogue. You got the Applegate. You got up in the gorge. You got the Columbia Gorge. And then you have Columbia Valley. Over here you've got the Snake River. But then so the people in the Willamette Valley said, whoa. And the people in Dundee Hills said, we have Jory soil. We have volcanic soils, and everybody seems to like ours, and so we want to put that on our labels, i.e. get more money for it, each bottle. And so they applied to have the Dundee Hills AVA. And so that happened, and then the people out in the Yamhill County said, oh, we got marine sediments out in that particular area. We want to put Yamhill County on it. Then the people up on Chehalem Mountain said, no, we want to put that on ours. And then the people down in the Eola Hills, which is interesting because it's a combination of soils and wind. You get all of the winds in the afternoon coming across from the Van Duzer corridors. Eola means wind. And so it's a combination of both of those. And so we have now subdivided the Willamette Valley now into 13 different sub-AVAs that are out here. The last one is the Lower Long Tom. And so it's based on geology and climate, and it's terroir that defines all of these things. So when we started our study back in the 1990s, we said, how many acres that we have here? These are the acres that we have got over here in our study. And the interesting thing is now we have all of the Willamette Valley on GIS, and they just released this just about a month ago, and now we're coming out with a complete geology map of all of the vineyards here, and then also a soil map. And so next time you hear me speak, we're going to have new numbers here, but the big picture stuff hasn't changed. The top 3 soils, acreages, were the Jory, Willackenzie, and Laurelwood soils. Now, what is the first number or the letter or the name that you have there? That is the name given to the soil by the Soil Conservation Service, or the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. And so the Jory soil was first described on Jory Hill down in Salem. And then the Willackenzie was actually where the Willamette and the Mackenzie rivers come together down south. And then Laurelwood is just outside of Laurelwood on Chehalem Mountain. And so those, and the second column is what's the geology? Basalt, Columbia River basalt is everywhere around here. And then the third thing is the soil name. Ultisols and alphasols mean red soils that are old and low in nutrients. And so they're all really, really good. Now, you go down here to Yam Hill. That is the Missoula flood sediments. And then also Woodburn here. And those are high nutrient soils from the Missoula floods. And so not real good for growing grapes, but the other 3 are the ones that are up on the sides of the hills and really, really good. And so we started showing this to all of the winemakers. And we said, how do these differ in flavors? And there were quite a few wineries that had vineyards on different soils. And they said, yeah, they are different in flavor. And so in the mid-90s, they started going to single vineyards and actually not combining them, even though there were other good ones, over on the Willackenzie soils and the Jory soils. And so those 3 became very, very popular. The geology here in wine country, you got one slide here. Off the coast, we have the Juan de Fuca Plate. We have a whole bunch of volcanoes 200 miles off the coast creating the Juan de Fuca Plate and the Gorda Plate that are being subducted underneath North America. They are uplifting the whole coast range, and then they are melting that plate, and it becomes the beautiful Cascade Mountains that you have got here, Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, etc. And so you uplift all of these marine sediments that are in the coast range, and so those are the sandstones, the siltstones, the shales, and stuff like that. So those are one type of soils. And then where the Oregon, Washington, and Idaho come together, you have got the Yellowstone hotspot. It's now over here, but it was right over, well, it's out down here, and then an extension up in this particular area between 15 and 18 million years ago, and it oozed out huge amounts of basalt. A lot of it got into the Columbia River, pushed the water off to the side, and then flowed all the way down to the coast. All the headlands that we have along the coast are all Columbia River basalts. And so that is the basalt that makes up the Dundee Hills, for instance, you got, and also rings the whole Willamette Valley. Whole Willamette Valley has got this Columbia River basalt on all sides. It all came from over here. So the great debate that started developing, in fact, in the mid-90s, it was Jory versus Willackenzie, and then the people up on Chehalem Mountain said, whoa, we love our Laurelwood soils. And so those are the 3 top soils. Which soil is it? Is it the Jory soil, which is developed on Columbia River basalts, or is it the Willackenzie soil, which are on these marine sediments, sandstones and shales, or is it the Laurelwood soil, which is on basalt bedrock, but it has windblown silt that has come in and weathered over 100,000 years into piezolites, which I'll show you in a second. They call it shot soil or BB soil. Iron concretions, iron magnesium concretions that you have got. But stay off of the Missoula flood sediments. Why? Because the Missoula flood sediments have too much calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, and phosphorus in it, and they just grow leaves and stems, and are not stressing the plants. You want to stress the plants. Get that raison d'etre that you've got. And so we go to the red hills of Dundee, the red soils that are out there, and that's the Jory soil, and you've got it right here. And this is what it looks like here. Nice A horizon, but red, going down for an awful long time. And another one of the questions that was earlier was, it is our state soil. It took me 12 years to get it through the legislature. And that is so difficult. So I was president of the Oregon Soil Science Society. And back in 1992, the Soil Science Society of America asked all of the state soil science societies to have a state soil. We had 5 state soils at that time. The first one was Antigo silt loam in Wisconsin. Now, why do we have a state anything? Why do we have a state tree, a state rock, a state song? The reason is all kids in 4th grade get a little pamphlet from the Secretary of State. And what are the things that are important in your state? And those are all of the things. We are the only state also that has a state nut. You know, for you native Oregonians, you're going to call it a filbert. The rest of us are going to call it hazelnut. But kids learn all of these things, and they wanted to highlight agriculture. And so having a state soil, you're going to be able to do that. And so we picked out, and it had to have 2 characteristics. It had to be very distinctive. Well, this is the reddest soil in the state, red, red, red. Secondly, it has to have large acreage, and the Jory soil is number 5 in the state of farmland. But to get anything through the legislature, you got to unite the east side of the state with the west side. And soils are all dominated by the weather. They're all on this side. All these soils are on the west side. And the people on the east side said, no, you can't do this. And we could never get out of committee, let alone get to the floor. And then I realized it's all on Columbia River basalt. Where did that Columbia River basalt come from? It came from where Oregon, Washington, and Idaho came out of the ground in the east, flowed all the way to the west side and solidified on the west side, but all that magma came from the east side. And I presented it to the committee. I said, this is a bill that's going to unite the Senate and the House together, because it all originated from the east side, developed on the west side, and they said, yes! And so, there it is, passed 2011. The 2 years before, it was voted the dumbest bill in the legislature. And I was on every talk show. Lars Larson, Burns, what are you doing? Bob Miller, Burns, what are you doing with this dumb bill? When it passed, nobody talked to me. I called up Bob Miller. Bob, do you want to talk? No. And but we now have a state soil. And so very, very important. And thank you for putting that in the questions too. And so here is this is actually the Willackenzie soil. This is out at Elk Cove Vineyards, one of my favorites, and with a bottle of wine there. And these are these little pisolites that define the laurelwood soil. It is really a Jory soil, but it also has all these pisolites in it, and creates a different flavor and a fun type of flavor that is hard to describe. And so, in the old days, you would pour 2 wines, and what I'm going to do is just compare the Jory to the Willackenzie. Laurelwood is halfway in between. So how are these flavors going to be? And you could just pour them, and I could always tell the Jory because it was always light red, and the other one was dark red. And then the flavors that went along with it, the raspberries, red plums, red currants, red cherries, strong bouquet, light red color. And whereas the Willackenzie soils would be black flavors, black berries, black cherries, black plums, strong finish, etc. And then Ken Wright, who was winemaker of the year about 2 or 3 years ago for the Wine Spectator, he said, Burns, you're a geologist. You guys drink wine out of boxes, you know. I mean, what do you know about flavors? And there's some truth to that. And he says, no, the basalt and the Jorys are more fruit-driven flavors, whereas the marine sediments are more floral and spice with a little lavender, cola, tobacco, cedar, and yeast. I said, geologists don't know what half those words are there. But the bottom line is they're different. And every winemaker you talk to said, yes, they are all different, but they all have their different descriptions that they have got. My favorite one is Adam Campbell, who is out at Elk Cove. And Elk Cove actually has vineyards in all 3, the Jory, the Willackenzie, and the Laurelwood, and they sell the bottles as terroir trios. And he says, you know, first of all, the marine sediments, black cherry and black silk, so black flavors and very silky. He said the Laurelwood is blue fruit and very, very earthy, and it is very earthy. And then the volcanic, the red colors, the red fruits, red pie, cherry, and spice that are there. And so when we have guests come over, I'll put 3 bottles of Pinot. Same year, same winemaker, and it's always Elk Cove. And the Jory, the Willackenzie, and the Laurelwood. So everybody has 3 glasses. And you get to choose, and which one do you like? And it's always incredible because everybody has different flavor buds and different ones that you have got. So that is the story of terroir in the Willamette Valley. I wish I had time to take you down to the Umpqua. I gave a talk just last month to all the winemakers down in the Umpqua and the Rogue Valley and down there. We put the story together here for the Willamette Valley, and then the Southern Oregon wine growers said, Burns, come on down, put together a story for us down here. And so they paid me and a student to go down and visit every vineyard in Southern Oregon. Now, the bummer thing is we could only sip wine at the last vineyard of the day, but we did get to visit a lot of them. And one thing, they have warmer climates, Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs, but they also, I think, make the best Tempranillo in the United States that is down there. And Abasella is my favorite winery in that area. And then up in the Columbia Gorge, oh my God, what a great winemaking area from Hood River up to the Dalles. And then you have Underwood Mountain, which is just across the river in Washington, and it's cool climate. And so you've got great Pinot Chardonnays, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blancs, and then my favorite European grape, Gruner Veltliner, which is a white wine that made Austria famous, all up there. And then you go all the way to the Dalles, 40 miles away, and they're growing Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs. And I mean, incredible. And their whole byline is from Burgundy to Bordeaux in 40 miles. And it's incredible that you have this great diversity in just a very, very short distance, so you can pick the grapes and get them into the winery and into the fermentation vats very, very immediately. And so, great story that you have got up there. I wish I had time to talk more about Walla Walla and the great heavy reds that they got out there. Best Syrahs in the United States are grown right on the boundary between Oregon and Washington in the new AVA Rocks of Milton Freewater, which is really neat. So the terroir differences that we have here in the Pacific Northwest, in Washington, 95% of all the vineyards that are up there are grown either on Missoula flood sediments or the windblown silt coming off of it. And you're saying, wait a second, you told us it's got way too many nutrients. They have to irrigate. Everything's irrigated, and so they put the restrictions, they put the stress on the grapes by giving it just enough water to keep the plants alive. Whereas down here, 90% of the vineyards that we have in the Willamette Valley are above the Missoula flood sediments. And so therefore, we don't irrigate, and so the soils are the ones that are going to put the restrictions on that. Now, I do a lot of work with Oregon State, and we have a great enology and viticulture program down here, and this is the land of Pinot. And they have developed an incredibly new variety of Pinot that is going to be very exciting. And it's a hybrid grape that is anti-diuretic. And it will reduce the number of trips that older people are going to be making to the bathroom every night. And it's going to be marketed as Pinot Noir. So just, go down to Freddy's, go down to your local thriftway to the wine person that you have got and make sure and see if they have that. So if you fell asleep at the beginning, what did I talk about? I talked about terroir and the importance of terroir and all of the factors that are involved in that. We talked about the difference between the Willamette Valley and eastern Washington and southern Oregon that you have got. Here we grow a lot of cool climate grapes, and which are just great differences in the flavors that you have. And the interesting thing, I was talking about the differences in flavors of the Pinot Noirs. It's even more different in the Rieslings. And so a lot of people are bringing back the Rieslings. And I've done just Riesling terroir tastings. Chehalem is one, Brooks is another one, Trisatum is another one, that have the 3 different soils. And as long as you keep the sugar content the same, then the flavors are really, really different. And now we are also looking at Chardonnays, because Oregon Chardonnays are lightly oaked, and we're now using the Burgundy clone, not the California clone. And David Adelsheim, one of the original founders of the industry, he said, Scott, I can tell the difference between the Jory and the Willamette and the Chardonnays. And so we need to explore that more, and then also in the Pinot Gris. And I think that we'll have similar stories in those particular areas there. So every time that you go out to my aim in life is every time you go out to a winery, that you're going to go in and ask, when you see a bottle, what is the year? Because the year is going to tell you a little bit about climate. And number two, what is the clone if it's a Pinot Noir? Is it one of the Dijon clones, 115, 777, et cetera, like that? Or is it Pommard at Wädenswil, which are the original ones? And then thirdly, what's the soil? Is it a Jory? Is it a Willamette or Laurelwood? Or now we're saying volcanic soils, marine sediments, and then the wind-blown silt soils. And then with that, I christen all of you terroirists. Go forward in the world, taste a lot of wines. Thank you very much for the chance to come and talk to you tonight.
Thank you.
I'm going to sip a wine.
Yeah, you need to have some wine.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are we going to have time for a couple questions?
Yes, we have time for some Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick off by asking you a question, and then I'm going to roam the audience.
Oh, good.
So everybody, if you have questions, as soon as he gets done answering one, raise your hand in the air, and I will come to you with a microphone. But I wanted to start off by asking you, now, you had mentioned of those essential elements that if the leaves were looking a little yellow, sometimes people would add a little molybdenum to make sure that they were healthy enough to grow. Can you fake terroir by adding and restricting elements like that, or is that just too complex?
I think it's too complex to fake the terroir. I mean, what you do is if the leaves are yellowish, they cut them off, they send them into the lab, and they say, is there a deficiency in this? And a lot of times it comes back boron and molybdenum. And so they're just trying to bring it up so they have all those basic chemicals for the growing of the grapes. Down the road, though, as we get into this and see what are the essential elements that are there, we might be able to add things to the soils or sprays or things like that. So, the potential is there. We just have to learn more. Remember, I mean, the industry here just goes back just 50 years. So
50 years, wow.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start over here.
Dr. Burns, I had a question about the different kinds of clones of a grape. How do you get different kinds of a clone?
All right. So how do you get different types of clones? The Pinot grape morphs itself as it reproduces. It makes new species, kind of. The genus stays the same, but the species change. And it is a grape that really changes a lot. And so what they do is, in Dijon, at the big institute there, they see what different grapes are naturally changing in the field. And then they will take the seeds and keep growing them, and see what are the flavors like. And sometimes they're great, sometimes they aren't. And then if they are great, then they will cultivate them more and more and more. So it is a grape that really changes naturally and morphs naturally genetically. So that's what's happening there. Some of the other ones don't do that. Another question down here.
So our daughter is going to school up in Walla Walla.
Oh, I love it. Whitman?
At Whitman.
Oh, wow.
And we've fallen in love with the wines up there. In fact, we say we're going to go visit her, but we're really going for the wine now. But the question I had for you is, every winery we've gone to has given us a slightly different story about what makes the wines so unique there. Obviously, the terroir is part of it, but what is it about the terroir up there that's so unique?
Yeah, so Southeast Washington is incredible. And so you're into a different climatic regime, and it's warmer. And so you're into the Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs out in that area. It's too warm for growing the Pinot Noirs. If you go further up north, Chateau Saint Michel started with Rieslings. But down in Southeast Washington, it's just too warm for those. And so the differences that you get there are not as pronounced as it is here in the valley that we get on the different soils that we get. Alan Busaka is one of my friends who is my equivalent up there in southeast Washington. And he's looked at the different soils, and the flavor differences are not that much different in some of them. So it's more the actual grape that you have got. We have bigger differences in the cool climate grapes, but the wines up there are so good. And so I bet you guys go up to visit your daughter up there at Whitman 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, right? Yeah, and you spend a week each time, probably. You know, we are so blessed here to have that, and then Southern Oregon also is some great wineries are opening up down there too, and you get out and differences that you have got, and so those are heavier reds in Washington and then down south. And I mentioned earlier the rocks of Milton Freewater, which is right on the Oregon-Washington border, and so a guy named Christophe Baron was a Frenchman who had made wine in France, but he was looking for vineyard property in the Walla Walla Valley. And they started in the Washington side, and then they went down to the Oregon side. And and it was $20,000 an acre, $21,000, 18, whatever the amount was. And then they went across the border into Oregon, and it was bottomland. And he noted on the map that there was 50 acres that was there. And he said, how about that? And the real estate agent said, that's bottomland. You don't want that. You want a good quality soils. And he said, well, let's just go over and look. And they dug a soil pit there, and it was just rocks and rocks and rocks. And he said, I'll take it. It was $5,000 an acre. And they said, you're crazy. He said, no. He understood, because if you go to Bordeaux, all of the best vineyards are down along the river. And back in the 1700s, when the nouveau riche had all this money, but they had no land, and the major landowners would not sell them, they got a whole bunch of Dutch people came down, and they reclaimed all the wetlands. They built levees out there, drained the wetlands, and those are the best vineyards that you have got in France. And they're all gravels and cobbles and sand. And that's where your great Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs are being, or not Syrahs, but Cab Francs are being produced down there. He knew that would be perfect to stress the grapes, and he got it for $5,000 an acre. His winery has really never had below a 94 or 95 in the Parker classification. And in fact, you can't visit his wine tasting room because you have to get onto his list. He sells out every year, and it's 8 years to get onto his list. And in fact, everybody else has bought up all of those vineyards along the rocks of Milton Freewater, AVA. And Kevin Pogue, my other equivalent up there, helped him define it. It's one soil, and it's one geology, but it produces incredible wines because it stresses the grapes out. So you got to go down. Be sure to go down to the rocks of Milton Freewater when you get up there. Another question.
Thanks. We talked, all night about terroir, but and early you showed an early map of like maybe 10 terroir regions, and then it expanded beyond that. So I'm going to try to combine two questions into one. But one is the terroir. Like, how does one necessarily say this is a distinct line of a border of a terroir versus another? Like, what are the actual characteristics? Is it really that sharp of a difference from one area to another? And how does that actually broken out and then decided maybe there's even sub-terroirs of an existing larger terroir, or let's just decide to expand in other areas that haven't been defined yet? And then tied to that is we have, decided certain terroirs are better than others. Who decides best, and how does that really come to be? Because it's not a scientific.
And those are two great questions, and thank you. So back to the first question was, how distinct are those lines? Some places it is very distinct, and the Missoula floods versus the areas above. I can take you down to Stoller Winery, which is down, one of my favorites, which is down just outside of Lafayette. And in the spring, when they've just plowed the fields, you can see the red soils of the Jory, and then the Missoula flood sediments are tan. And I mean, it is an incredible line that is there. And you can taste grapes grown in the tan soils and versus the one in the red soils. Same winemaker, you got to have all the things the same, and they're completely different. And so that is a place where you have got a very, very sharp line. But a lot of other places, it's very wide, especially the climatic types of things that you have got. It could become political, but in general, you know, when we were trying to get a state soil, some of the people down in wine country said, I'm on the Willamette soil, and I do not want the Jory to become that was political, and that was one of the problems we ran into. But so that's the question there. The second question, which I've already forgotten, if you just read. Okay, so who determines what is better? No, there isn't any. So a lot of times I will do terroir tastings, and we'll do the 3 different soils. And then I have people vote on those. And every person is different. And there will be people that will say, oh, I like the Jory, the same ones. And then, no, this person says, no, Willamette, this one, Laurelwood. And so everybody has different taste buds and different flavors and what you like and what you don't like. And so that is an individual thing. The important thing is that there's a difference. So there are groups that just, you know, love the volcanic soils, and other ones that just love the marine sediment soils and the Willamette, and other ones, those people up on on Chehala Mountain and Laurelwood soils. Oh, we like our feisty little Pinots that are there. So that's all personal. That's all personal when you get there. But the important thing is their differences. There's a question.
In 2020, the wildfire brought the smoke taint to Oregon. But last year, there was a wildfire in France and also in Spain. That was really big deal, but there was no reported smoke taint. So I wonder, in your opinion, is this really related to tɛr្wɑr, or is it something else that determines whether, you know, the wildfire would give you the smoke taint or not?
And so smoke tainting, or the effect of the smoke on the grapes. Once it gets onto the grapes, you can't get it off. This is a real problem. And so it basically destroys the wine. And so in 2020, when we had all of the wildfires here in the Willamette Valley, a lot of people didn't even pick their grapes. They said, why spend all the money and time in the barrels and stuff like that to do that, because you're not going to sell it. We also remember we had the big fire up in the gorge that time too. And it got within 2 miles of Phelps Creek Winery and Vineyards up in Hood River. And Bob Morris, who owns that, is a good friend of mine. And he didn't pick anything that year because his grapes were just completely immersed in the smoke. But he did take his premier vineyard, and he did make 2 barrels of this. And he went through the normal thing of fermentation and everything, and then he bottled it as Calamity wine. And so I bought a case of it, because in my wine tastings, I want people to know what a smoke-tainted wine tastes like. And everybody, straight across the board when they sipped it, said, this would go great with barbecue. I mean, they did. But that's not what the winemakers want. And so every year at the wine conferences, the seminars on wildfires and what to do, you know, how much smoke is bad for your crop. And I mean, it's a huge deal, and we're trying to figure this out right now. And also California has huge wildfires. You know, Napa and Sonoma had a few years ago. And so it is a big deal. Right now, we don't have a solution, but they're working on that. A lot of people are working on that. And so thank you for bringing that question up about the fires and the smoke. It is the #1 problem that not only we have here in Oregon, but all over the winemaking areas around the world. Another question.
So early on in the talk, you talked about how you make a great wine, and
Obviously, terroir is one of them. The other way is what barrel you use.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you distinct what the barrel affects versus the terroir?
So barrel, those are decisions that the winemaker makes. And so here in the valley, the majority of the barrels that we use are the French oak because it's delicate. It is wonderful. American oak is bold, and so you use that with the Cabs, Merlots, and Syrahs. But if you don't have a lot of money, you go to Hungarian oak, which is also similar to French oak, but about half the price of the barrels. And so this is up to the winemaker, and the winemaker makes those decisions. What yeast you have, and do you oak it or not, and then what type of oak. And so when I talk about terroir, I'm talking about the general characteristics of the region. The best example in the world for me is the Sauvignon Blanc wines that come from the Marlborough Sounds of New Zealand. Doesn't matter who the winemaker is, it all tastes that very, very similar way. And it's the soils, the climate, and the grape varietal that they're using down there. Whereas here, I mean, the winemaker wants to produce a great wine. And it takes time for the winemaker to figure out what oak is best for those particular wines and what yeast is best and all of those. And I use the example of Texas. I love basketball. I was down for the Final Four event 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago in San Antonio. In the north of San Antonio, lots and lots of vineyards. Gorgeous vineyards and everything. When it's mostly Cabs, Merlots, Syrahs, and stuff like that. Wines were not very good. In fact, not very good at all. But then I was back down there just last year, and we went to about 4 or 5 of those similar wineries, and boy, they were pretty good. It takes time for the winemaker to figure out what oaks, what yeasts, and all the techniques that you do and don't do in order to make the quality wines that they want to have. And then some winemakers will tell you, I want to have a wine that does this. And other winemakers, this is what I want to do. And the techniques that are there. So terroir tasting is when you have the same winemaker and then different vineyards that you've got in the same year. And so then you're tasting the differences in the soil. Great, thank you. You guys are asking wonderful questions. Yes?
So in the foreseeable future with climate change, do you see the areas opening up more where wineries like Mount St. Helens area?
And that's true. And so all of Western Washington is going to be becoming a wine-producing area. Clark County has 30 different wineries right now. And the soils they're mostly Missoula flood sediments, not the best soils, and so most of their best grapes and wines are using grapes that come from southeast Washington or brought over. But as the climate warms up, I see more and more vineyards between us and Seattle. And we also have quite a few wineries on Vancouver Island up there. And they're mostly white wines. But you'll see all of those developing. Okanagan is producing some great cool climate grapes, but with time, they will morph into the beginning of the warm climate ones. So all of these areas are going to be changing. And what you want to do is have good geology, geology that creates good flavors in the wine. There are some. Southern Oregon and Napa and Sonoma have a real problem with the geology. Serpentine. Serpentine is a green rock, high in magnesium. It's the kiss of death for a wine. And it's just, the wines are awful. And so before you develop a vineyard in Napa and Sonoma or Illinois Valley in Oregon, you do a soil sample. You want to have a 6-to-1 ratio of calcium to magnesium in the soil. In most of those places, it's 1-to-6. There's so much magnesium. And so therefore, you've got to add something with a lot of calcium in the soil. Now, if you add lime, calcium carbonate, it changes the pH and it screws up the whole system. But if you add gypsum, it doesn't change the pH. Gypsum is plaster. And you can get the calcium in there and everything is fine. And so these are little things that you learn about certain areas. What are the problems that you have got? And then you need to overcome them, and they have done them. Great question. Thanks.
Hi, Dr. Burns. I have a question. I've been looking at the soils down in the Eola Amity area, along with the maps. And I know that the flood waters of Missoula have gone up to 400 feet, and then 260 and 190. And my question is, when you're doing your test pits out there, are you finding that there's kind of a draping effect of the Missoula flood deposits that create kind of more of a veneer of soil overlying the bedrock? And as the grapes grow, even though they may be on the Missoula floods, they're tapping into the underlying volcanic and marine sedimentary rocks.
You nailed it, and that is really what is happening down there. So the Eola Hills are primarily volcanic soils. So it's the Jory soil that you have got. But as you go down the hill, then eventually you hit the Missoula flood sediments. And you are right, the Missoula flood sediments are very thin at that 250, 300 feet elevation. And a lot of people will plant on those because they do their backhoes and they say, oh, it's only 3 feet thick. The roots will eventually get through into the volcanic soils. And so it produces an interesting combination flavor that you have got in those cases. But once the roots are down into the volcanic soils, then you're starting to stress the grapes. And while we're down in the Eola Hills, there is another, up on top, a lot of the soils are very, very thin. They're only just, 2 to 3 feet thick. And that's the Nakaya soil. It's also volcanic. And I think those produce some of the best wines because those roots get right down into the bedrock. Ken Wright says when he plants a vineyard, he can always tell when the roots have gotten through the soil and into the bedrocks because the complexity changes at that particular period of time. And so down there in the Eola Hills, they have got these 2 major soil types. And then as you go down into the Missoula floods, right at the boundary, you have quite a few wineries that are down there too. And on the backside, there are a few marine sediments that you got there. So interesting stuff down there. But knowing the geology, knowing the elevations, everything, you have different types of vineyards and produce different flavors. So great question. We have time for one more? Or you got it? You got it.
I think that we would like to close by asking you, what is the one thing that you want everybody here to take home tonight from tonight's conversation?
The importance of geology and in all of this. And so I'm going to be around here afterwards if anybody has a question or a comment, or if I even have any old students. Come on up and say, oh, I remember taking your class, blah, blah, blah. Come on up here afterwards. And then also, I see a few people with hair color like mine. And so I retired 8 years ago, but I love to teach. And every spring, a quarter at Portland State, I teach geology of the national parks, which starts April 4th all the way to June 6th. And it's Tuesday, Thursdays, 10 to 11:40. And Portland State has a thing, if you're 65 years old and retired, you can take classes for free. You are a senior adult auditor. And so if anybody is interested in taking my class, come up and see me afterwards. I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Or just email me, BurnsS, BURNSS @pdx.edu, and I will tell you all about that. And when you retire, what do you want to do? You want to travel. And so that's a neat thing. And so to answer your question that is there's just 2 things that I wanted to mention to you, and that is geology rocks.
Thanks
for coming out tonight.